Good. Yeah. Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to those attending and also our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Pensions Committee. My name is Councillor Reeta Chamdal. I'm the chair of this meeting. These are the business to be discussed today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. Please note that members of the committee will be using laptops or tablets to view the agenda today. Fire alarm. We're not expecting a fire drill today, so if the alarm does go off, please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. Mobile devices. For those in the room, please switch off any mobile devices before the meeting starts or put them on silent. Councillors, if you have any declaration of interest to make in relation to today's agenda, please ensure that you state whether it's a pecuniary or non-pecuniary and give the reason for your interest. Members need not declare any interest in any item on the agenda where they have already listed this on the register of interest. Furthermore, you do not need to declare any interest just because you're a ward councillor or because you're a governor. For those watching YouTube via YouTube, you are reminded that you can complete one of our resident feedback forms, and these can be found in the information section underneath the YouTube videos. The forms are intended to help us improve the way that we run our meeting. So before we move on, I would just like to introduce members of the committee and officers attendant today for members of the public here today and those watching on YouTube.
Councillor Peter Smallwood.
Councillor Stuart Mathers.
Marion George, Independent Advisor.
Emily Maguire, Investment Advisor.
Johnny Moore, Investment Advisor.
Roger Hackett, Chair of the Pensions Board.
Tony Noakes, Pension Board Member.
Carl Pereira, Trainee Pension Fund Accountant.
Sunday Adekoya, Pensions Manager, Finance and Governance, Pensions and Governance, sorry.
Pete Carpenter, Director of Pensions, Treasury and Statutory Accounts.
We have Hampshire on Teams calls.
Anisha Tedji, Democratic Services.
Wonderful. And can I just welcome Councillor Peter Smallwood, who has joined the Pensions Committee. Thank you very much, Councillor Smallwood. So, any declaration of interest in the matters coming before this meeting? None? Lovely. So, minutes of the meeting of the dated 24th of September 2025. Do we have any amendments, or are the meeting yet agreed? Agreed? Apologies.
Apologies from Councillor Banerjee today.
And apologies from Steve Muldoon, Corporate Director of Finance, who's in a budget meeting.
Lovely, thank you. Okay. So, just to confirm that items marked Part 1 will be considered in public and those marked Part 2 will be considered in private. Can I just reiterate, as per the points in the Chairman's announcements I've just made, we might also, it is the members of the committee who can ask questions on the agenda items and not members of the public. Okay, Part 2 items are discussed with the press or public present and will be asked to leave as they're confidential. So, moving straight on to there. Just also like to add one final point. We have quite a few lengthy items that will need some discussion and debate, which are predominantly in Part 2. So, without stifling any debate or any questions, I would like to get through Part 1 as quickly as possibly can. Is that okay with committee members and officers? Wonderful. Thank you. Lovely. We move on to our first agenda item, which is agenda item 5, and it's a petition hearing from Leslie Dovecote. Leslie, would you like to come forward, please? Lovely, thank you, Leslie. You just need to switch your mic on when you're ready to speak. Okay, lovely.
Okay. Hi, I'm Leslie Doveton. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. I've lived and worked in Hillingdon Borough for over 40 years. I'm a pensioner and a member of this pension scheme. I am also a member of the Hillingdon PSC and the lead petitioner. There's been a lot of support locally for this petition. Over 1,000 residents have signed. Local groups like Hillingdon TUC have drafted a motion, plus Unison scheme members have written to the Pensions Board. I'd like to tell you what we, as local residents and members of the Hillingdon Palestine Solidarity Campaign, would like the outcomes to be. Firstly, we request the Pension Committee hold a special meeting to review the legal notice, as today's agenda doesn't provide sufficient time to discuss this. Then we request an end to Hillingdon Council's investment of our pension funds in companies complicit in the genocide in Gaza and the oppression of the Palestinian people. We ask you to use your influence as part of the London Collective Investment Vehicle to publicly lobby it to divest from companies enabling Israel's human rights abuses, and to commit to end any procurement contracts with companies such as Barclays that are complicit in Israel's attacks, and to put in place policies to ensure no future investments can be made in these companies. Hillingdon Council has invested over $6 million in organisations and companies that allow Israel to continue its grave breaches of international law. We have details of each individual company within that investment, the amount invested and the consequences of their involvement with Israel. Hillingdon has the highest percentage in the LSIV. This information is publicly available to the Council and the residents of Hillingdon. Along with all councils in England and Wales, Hillingdon Council has received a legal notice from PSC outlining the Council's obligations to immediately act to divest from those companies enabling or profiting from Israel's crimes. 26 councils have already committed to ending ties with companies complicit in Israel's breaches of international law. When speaking to our fellow residents, many of whom have worked or still work for the council, they are shocked to hear the investment is used in this way. They would like to know where their councillors stand on this issue. As more people become informed, and judging by the strong reaction so far, it is untenable for those investments to continue. Councils, therefore, have a duty to not contribute to these violations of international law and to take all possible steps to end them. Hillingdon Council must do the same. Some people ask why we should care here in Hillingdon, saying it's nothing to do with us or a local issue. But this is not the case for many local British Palestinians and countless concerned residents. We are all connected by our shared humanity, and this petition highlights our responsibility to speak and act. We care, along with millions of people around the world, all advocating for peace, fighting for humanity and compassion. We do not need to list the atrocities, tell you the figures, show you images of limbless children. This is the most documented genocide of our time. The absolute and undeniable horror has reached this room, us, you, and the residents that you represent. Did you know that Israel has violated the so-called ceasefire over 500 times since the 10th of October and continues to devastate Gaza? Humanitarian aid is still heavily restricted. This violence has resulted in the loss of hundreds and thousands of lives, 70% of whom are women and children. Apart from the strong moral imperative, there is the legal situation that Israel has violated peremptory norms of international law and violated the Geneva Convention. This means serious consequences for the UK under international law. These investments mean we are complicit in war crimes and a genocide. This is not acceptable. We ask you to acknowledge and respect the residents who have signed this petition and those who we know have contacted their councillors personally. This is not in our name. There can be no excuse. We would like to hear what kind of commitment you can make today. The whole world sees the real horror. Children between the ages of 4 and 9 account for the highest number of casualties. The whole world knows it and feels it. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie, for taking the time out today and coming out today. I think I owe an apology, I've mispronounced your surname. It's Leslie Dovetone, isn't it?
Leslie Doveton.
Doveton, lovely. Thank you. Do apologise for mispronouncing it earlier. Thank you very much for taking the time out today. The overriding fiduciary duty of the Pension Fund Committee, which, can I just reiterate to everybody, is non-political. is to ensure that the funds can pay its ongoing pension fund liabilities. The fund does need to take into account other factors such as the ESG issues, but these should be looked at through the fiduciary lenses of the primary objective. We, the Council and the Pension Committee, are currently in the process of updating its investment strategy, ISS, if you see it in some papers, which will take account into all these factors. This will be approved in the open portion of the next Pension Fund Committee on the 24th of March 2026. So we will take into consideration your comments today when coming into the decision of our investments. Before we move on to the next agenda item, do any councillors wish to make any comments?
Yes, I'd like to. I've had many letters from my residents on the same issue, and I noticed that a legal notice was issued to all councils who have a LGPS to say that they need to divest from companies enabling occupation against Palestinians. I think there's a website that's been set up where you can track each council and the companies that are involved in the pension funds in this particular area. And if you look at Hillingdon Council, for example, you can see that companies like Boeing are listed. They make helicopters that were used extensively in attacks on civilians, and we're investing in this sort of thing. So I think that this is something that we need to look at to make sure that our pensions are ethical. And I wonder whether we can have a separate meeting to discuss this petition.
Thank you, Councillor Bassett. We will be discussing the investment strategy later on in part 2, so you are welcome to raise any questions that you have there, Councillor Bassett. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank residents and those who are part of the pension fund for bringing this to our attention. I think it's really important that we consider this as part of our responsible investment strategy that we're looking forward in the time ahead. This is really timely because we are just about to set the strategy for the next several years. And I know this is in part 2 that we're discussing it, where it's in a private agenda, and I just ask that we, once we've discussed this fully and once it becomes part of, or whatever considerations are made, that we make sure that there is public documents available for people to look at and to see how what decisions were made, so that we can show residents that we have considered fully the things that are raised, and we can show residents that when matters are raised through petition, that we'll spend time to consider them meaningfully within our role as a pension fund. But I just stress, as I always do, that ESG for me is a significant part of pensions decision making, although we do have to make sure that the fund serves its pensioners over the 20-year period. The way in which companies and funds conduct themselves is important to our members of the scheme as well, and so we take that into consideration every time we look at investments.
Thank you, Councillor Mathers. And can I reiterate that we have had several meetings over the last few weeks and months around our investment strategy and looking at our ESG portfolio as well. So we will take into consideration everything that you brought to us today, Leslie, and obviously as a committee we will work together, and we have got further discussion later on in part 2. Once they are, it has been fully decided, it does become public. Yeah. Okay. And as I said, we will be doing it in part 1 in March 2026 when it's been finalised. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much for your time today, Leslie, and thank the residents for coming along with you. You're welcome to stay for the rest of part 1 if you wish, or you're welcome to leave.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, over to agenda item 6, the Pensions Administration Report. Tunde and Pete, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just give a brief introduction and then I'll hand over to Hampshire just to add anything else. This is the standard report. This is for the next quarter. Sorry, this is to the end of October. Members in the fund continue to grow. We've got over 32,000, although I'd highlight for me probably the big issue as a finance person is the fact that our actives are only 9,400, deferred are 12,000, and we've now got almost 9,000 pensioners. And obviously that pension number will go up and up over time, and this is part of the important thing we'll be talking about in terms of the investment strategy to make sure we can actually deliver to that. Active is only 29% of the fund now. 100% compliance on SLAs. We've got 242 cases processed, the average completion within SLA. The vast majority of the 502 outstanding cases is actually for us waiting for data from third parties now. So other pension funds, schools and administering bodies, which is something I know all funds struggle with, but we all try and improve it over time. The member portal now has 55% membership. I'll bring up the normal thing I say at this point, was I'm always worried about those that aren't members, because obviously that's the easiest way for us to communicate with people. We have the 114 active employers, 1 exit in October, and we've got pending changes of 2 exits and 10 admitted bodies coming up. In terms of McLeod, I mean, we've talked about this in the past, but the deadline has been extended through to another year, to August, to deliver the things that can't be delivered. Now, we've delivered on the vast majority of these. There's only 2 areas we're not delivering on at the moment. And the pensions dashboard, I'm sure Hampshire will give us a quick update, because as of we were supposed to be by the end of November, the connection to Hampshire should have been completed, which is positive, because if members remember, we had an issue with the audit side of it, and that has been fully resolved. But I don't think I've missed much. Do you want to add, Catherine?
Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much for your continued progress with things. I just wondered if I could ask some specifics if the answers are known. If not, I'll take them in writing afterwards. So, with the outstanding cases for administrative performance, how long on average do we see that those cases are outstanding? I assume they're all within the year. My second question is on, and I just need to find the stats so I can get it right. With the backlog of historic cases, which I know is not this provider's fault, I just wondered if we had an idea of the actual end date of getting all those resolved. I know there's only 243 remaining of a whopping 4,000, but it'd be nice to know when we finally put all that to bed, as it were. And the very final question is, would we have hit the McLeod original deadline, or was the information not available in order to do so before the extension?
Just to add to that, I think we were non-compliant in 2 areas of the McLeod from the report the last time we came. I think that they were due to the fact of software and technical issues across the country rather than just us.
Tunde?
In terms of the backlog cases, so we've had a very extensive discussions with Hampshire about those. The 243 left are those which we are unable to resolve because of the lack of information, and the conclusion is that those might stay on for a while, but eventually when the individuals come to retirement, that might possibly be when they will be resolved, because some of the information I think predates Hampshire and they are not readily available, and some of the other reasons is that the employers have disengaged the previous payroll providers and the archived information is no longer available. So, but before anybody retires, those issues will be resolved one way or the other.
Councillor Mathers.
If I may then, Chair, just on that point, it would be useful to make sure that we've got the kind of risk assessment or legal advice on that basis, if it is only going to get resolved before retirement, which could be a few minutes for people, or it could be many, many, many years, but I suspect they're going to be longer term. My thinking around this is that there has been significant progress made. We know there is a small proportion of complicated cases left, and I just wonder the value of it continuously being reported when it is something that has been worked really significantly, or whether it should just form part of a risk assessment or another aspect of our kind of accountability on this. I'm happy to leave that to officers and chair to think about.
Thank you. Fair point, Councillor Mathers. Any more on agenda item 6? No?
We just need to know the report.
Yes, before I let Catherine go. So the recommendations are that the Pension Committee just note the administration update. Noted. Lovely. Catherine, thank you very much. You're welcome to stay or you can leave. Entirely up to you. As it's the last meeting of 2025, I would love, if you are going to leave, I'd love to wish you and your team a very Merry Christmas, and we'll see you in 2026. And I think on behalf of the committee and the officers, we'd love to thank you for all the support you've given us. I think I've been a chair for a year, and I've seen the progress that you've steadily made. So we are going in the right upward trajectory. So thank you very much.
I will go, but thanks very much for that. Much appreciated, and I'll make sure.
Okay. Agenda item 7, investment fund strategy and fund manager performance. Over to Tunde and Pete again, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll introduce this and then with questions we've got Jenny and Sian here for any questions you might need. So this is the standard report, and just to not to labour the point, but it will be a point in part 2. This is a point we've jointly worked with on the CIV for the last 2 to 3 years, and so it's one of the positives we've got with working with the CIV. We would not like to lose this sort of thing when we go into the shake-up later on. The actuary's quarterly update sets the funding level at 146%, up from 136% in Q2. Can I just remind everyone that is in 20 years. We are not fully funded at the present time, but we're not far from it. Assets are up to almost 1.5 billion, up 100 million this quarter, and liabilities have gone down by 20 million. Discount rate and pension increases are 6.9% and 2.1% respectively, and it's really that discount rate which has risen particularly over the last periods. In terms of investment performance, this quarter we've beaten benchmark by 0.3%, and the year to date we're slightly up. The returns are 8.4 and 9.6 over 3 years. It's not surprising. The major contributors are the equities in terms of, and we've seen this across the world, in terms of equity returns. Our underperformance is in the dislocation fund and the private equities portions. Really, that's all I wanted to say. I mean, it's what it is, and this is what we're now working on with our new investment strategy and performance strategies. Happy for questions.
Any questions? Councillor Mathers?
If I may just make one brief point, because we are discussing this at length in part 2, and maybe this is the question I ask now that can be answered in part 2, but I would be keen to hear from officers how we intend to protect ourselves in case there was a Big 7 US bubble pop in equities, as they are the largest growth factor at the moment. I mean it in a practical rather than a philosophical as well. But yes, I'm sure that could be explained in detail in part 2.
Thank you, Councillor. We will be discussing that when we do the ISIO presentation in terms of the investment strategy, because one of the things we did talk about a week ago Friday was how we start to protect ourselves.
Any further comments? No. So, we should recommend that the Pensions Committee note the funding and performance updated. Agreed? Noted. Moving swiftly on to agenda item 8, which is the responsible investment, and again over to Tunde.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this paper is to inform on how managers entrusted with investing the pension fund assets implementing their ESG policies and demonstrate their commitment to ensuring it's a cogent part of their investment process. So we have summarized the voting breakdown on page 40, and there is a high-level summary of each manager's voting patterns on pages 41 to 44. So based on this, LGIM were the most active with, and they, during the quarter, supported resolutions in approximately 72% of cases and voted against the managers in 27% of cases. So, and added to that is the engagement activities of the LAPFF. So during the quarter under review, LAPFF engaged with several companies, and there are 3 separate examples of their engagement on environment, society, and governance. And one of them is regarding cement companies, Heidelberg and CRH. So they engage with both companies, and the outcome of their engagements are explicitly provided on page 47. The recommendation for this item is for the committee to note the fund manager's activities and compliance efforts, and the LCIV and the LAPFF engagement activities. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mathers.
Apologies here, coming straight in there. Very grateful for the table on page 41 that shows the categories of the shareholder motions or the resolutions. It does provide what I feared with the large number of kind of voting against, that it is around kind of remuneration director-based issues and governance rather than the social and the environmental factors, which is what I suspected. And I have no objection to LGIM making that calculation on the basis of ensuring that boards are kept to account. But it does show for me the importance of being engaged with groups like LAF who can engage on more social and environment and keep that balance between, the large amount of engagement we get through LGIM, but also, that LAF keeping the CIB and others as well accountable to our ESG. But yeah, it is as I suspected, and I would be keen to know a little bit more, and we have seen examples in the past, and I can read the details on the drive of just how much more engagement happens from LGIM on those other 2 issues rather than just the director-based and governance-based issues. But that's more pondering than it is a question.
Okay. Oh, left that one. I wanted to just thank you as well, Councillor Mathers, for representing the Borough for the Pension Committee on LAPS this year as well. So thank you for your support on that one. Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow on from Councillor Mathers' question, do we think this is a significant change in behaviour or voting patterns? Is there anything that the committee should be aware of? Is there any particular factors that have caused that, or is this pretty standard? Because, you know, if you're voting against 30% of it, like most organisations and almost things, that's not great. So I just wanted to understand, is this a trend that's, being new to the committee, is it a trend we see a lot, or is this a significant change in voters' the behaviours? Sorry.
Thank you for that, Councillor. I think I'll ask Izio and the Civ, really, because you see more of this than we do in terms of the wider than just Hillingdon.
I think when you look at the table on page 41, I think what's important to note is there are pretty standard shareholder resolutions that come through every year, whether that's annual report on accounts and re-electing elections. What I found quite interesting looking at the table, that these are shareholder proposed resolutions on the table on the left-hand side, and I think they probably do go a little bit in cadence as to some of the issues at the time, but I think the councillors' points made of being persistent with your themes to really try and see real-world outcomes, so I think your points are very valid, but I don't think there is anything, not very many things on audit-related type of things. The one which, and maybe it gets caught up, but I know the one area that a lot of people, from a governance point of view, is cyber security, and we're maybe not seeing very much there, but I do think probably some of the resolutions on the environment, given a lot of companies are US domiciled, has probably dropped down a little bit. Doesn't mean that it's gone off the company's radar. It's just, how many resolutions are actually coming through from American shareholder base.
Any further questions before we move on? Okay, so do we as a committee note the fund manager's ESG activities and compliance efforts, and then do we note the LSIM and LAPS activities? Noted. Wonderful. Okay, moving on swiftly to agenda item 9, the pension fund risk register. Over to you, Tunde.
Thank you, Chair. This report is presented to the committee to identify the main risks the pension fund faces and enable the committee to monitor and review risks going forward. So there are two attachments to this report. One, foreclosed risk, which consists of 7 risks, and these are risks that are being managed and as business as usual, so they are being tolerated. Then the second set of risks are the 7 risks which remain open. These are being actively managed. So committee is recommended to consider and agree the risk register in terms of the approach and the specific risks identified and measures being taken to mitigate those current risks. But I'd like to point out that in future, the list might expand with the Fit for Future legislation coming in. So there is bound to be changes to this, and we have to do a complete review of our risk register and how we view risk going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, and just to exemplify what Tunde said, the rules came out yesterday. So we've got a lot of work to do now, and we've only been waiting for these rules for about 5 months. And it really, the biggest issue we all have is we're meant to go live 1st of April next year and get a lot of things, and we'll be talking about some of this in part 2, but timescales are really tight, and we've still got to consult in terms of back to the government.
Okay, thank you, Pete.
Just 2 points, if I may. So, in terms of liquidity for members' dealings, the risk rating seems fine, but I just wondered if there was any update, because there has been a concern over several committees that could be shared. And the other one was just maybe one of the risks is continually late publishing of national guidance that is putting things at risk, but that may come into several of the risks already there.
So in terms of the liquidity of members' dealings, I think we are on top of that right now, because we currently have an overview of, well, let me start by saying we're sort of negative in terms of money being contributed and pensions paid out. But we have a very good cash balance in the custody account, which covers this. And we haven't so far, in the last 20, 30 years, having to sell assets to pay pensions. So, and that's because of the investment decisions that's been made by committee in the past. So, for example, investments such as private equity, which are currently winding down, are now providing us the sufficient, the needed cash to bridge the gap between the pensions paid and the contributions. So we're in a very, very good place. And we're about to do an overview as well, going forward, of what risks will sort of arise as a result of the initial results on valuation. So as we all know, there's probably going to be reduction in contributions for employers. That will affect our cash flow as well. So we are going to do a sort of review of that. And one of the tools we have in our toolbox is to, rather than reinvest some of our investments income, divert that to come straight to us, which will sort of plug the gap further. So,
quick supplement on that, if I may. Is it possible to produce like a bell curve on when we get to that point where the maturity of assets that provide cash stop, and we get to that point where we have to think of other strategies like not reinvesting cash into investments? Just to get a sense of, because we know that a number of things are maturing or have been maturing now for a couple of years, and they will mature, but that's going to stop at some point. And it's just about, in terms of cash, just to get a sense of the trajectory. Maybe I just need a graph or a picture.
Yeah, Chair. So in terms of that, we're already ahead of the game with that. So last year, in conjunction with ESIO and the advisors, we looked at the options open to us, because currently, like you said, private equity, private debt by Permira are coming to the end of their shelf life. So the returns on those will dwindle. And we've sort of identified a couple of other investments. One is we receive the MAC fund, which gives us close to about 10 million a year. That is one source. So rather than do it piecemeal, like take a little from there, we're looking at a holistic approach of look at one particular, sorry, Marion.
I was just going to say, this is one of the considerations that came into the investment strategy, which we'll be talking about in part two.
In part two, yeah. So, yes, but in a nutshell, I can provide a graph showing you where we are in terms of the bell curve for the alternative assets, and yeah.
Thank you, Chanda. I think that will be also helpful for Councillor Smallwood, as well, new to the committee. He can see where we're coming from. There's probably quite a lot to take in today. Councillor Smallwood, you had a question.
I did actually. It's not about investments. Does the risk, I've written it down actually, does the risk register explicitly include non-investment risks, so like cyber security attacks, I don't know, administrative error, compliance and legal? I understand, and I might be wrong, but I was reading that it is recommended they are included.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Smallwood. So they are included. If I just flip over to the risk register itself.
7.
So I think on pages 51 and 52, we do have the list of the open and closed risks. No, 51 and 53, sorry, beg your pardon. And cyber risk is one of the risks listed in there as well. So apart from financial risk, there are other risks which are listed. Thank you.
Marion.
I just wanted to say that we should make sure that even if we don't write it, that risk 11, which is about failure of the pool, is actually also covers the considerable amount of work that will be required by us and the pool by the end of March to make sure we complete Fit for the Future, and it's not a non-zero risk, that one.
No, that's a fair point. I think the report that came out yesterday highlighted quite a few bits that we can question in the next few days. Councillor Matters.
Just on that very quickly, so with the next meeting being in March, which is probably quite late, I assume we would have special meetings if there was anything urgent we needed to decide. But without creating too much work when there's already lots of work on, it would be useful to just have some touch-base meetings, maybe in early February, just to get a sense of where we are with it, so that we don't identify any risks too late in the day that the committee needs to consider. Yeah, I think Pete and we were having a conversation yesterday on this as well, when I was prompted to catch up on the papers, but go ahead.
No, I think that's sensible because there's some pretty key dates. Our next committee meeting is mid-March, and I think we might well need at least 2 touch bases before then, in terms of just because there's a couple of points when we come to part 2 where we'll have to have made decisions, and I need to make sure you've all been updated on those decisions before they're made. And we are in a good place because we're in front of most, but they're still massive decisions. And I think it's fair to say that there are, as we know here and we've talked about before, there are massively differing views on what those decisions are on the 34 councils.
On that, can I just reiterate that if we are having touch-base meetings, can the councillors and committee members please make a concerted effort to try and attend those? I get it, we've got busy workloads, but we will work around you to say what time is most appropriate to have a catch-up, because they are vital, these 2 catch-ups that we're going to do before March. Okay. On that, any other questions? No? So, does the committee consider and agree the risk register in terms of the approach, the specific risks identified and the measures being taken to mitigate those current risks, and note the format agreeing the retired risk and those which remain open? Agreed? Agreed. I'll put this on. Over to agenda item 10, governance.
Thank you, Chair. So, this particular agenda item is kind of loaded today due to a few revised policies we've brought to committee. So the committee work plan is shown and it's been reviewed as well, and we've moved a few policies from this which were originally scheduled to be reviewed this quarter to March, so that it ties in with the triennial valuation. So, and those are the conflicts of interest, training policy, and responsible investment. So they will all be brought to committee in March 2026, at the same time when the triennial valuation results will be provided to committee for ratification. The other part of this agenda item, which committee should note, is the continuous professional development of committee members, and we have actually attached a training log for all committee members there, just to capture the efforts and the training undertaken by all committee members so far during 25-26. The next agenda item is the next item on this agenda is the General Code of Practice. So, the General Code of Practice, which was which came into effect in September 25. We have so far not been fully compliant, but there are 2 agenda items which will be considered in Part 2 that would make us compliant. One of them is the cyber policy, and the other one is the EDI policy. So both, once approved, will ensure we are fully compliant when it comes to the compulsory aspects of the General Code of Practice. The next agenda item is the draft funding strategy statement. So the FSS was produced by Hymans Robertson as a fallout of the initial investment, initial triennial evaluation results. So these have been brought to committee today to approve for consultation by all employers within the fund. And the key elements of the FSS, the funding strategy statement, is to establish a clear, transparent fund-specific strategy, identifying how employers' pension liabilities are best met going forward, to support the desirability of maintaining a constant and stable primary contribution rate. So part of that is to stabilize the contribution rate. So we don't want a spike in rates or a drastic drop. So there is a stability mechanism whereby we make it really, really constant, so that at the next triennial evaluation we wouldn't have to increase the contributions for any employer drastically that might have impact on their financial capabilities. So one of the other ideas of the FSS is to ensure that the regulatory requirements to set contributions to ensure solvency and long-term cost efficiency is met as well. So we are presenting this to committee today to consider and approve for consultation. And based on the responses from the consultation, it will be brought back in March for ratification. Sorry, Councillor Meadows.
So, mate, I just wondered if you could, sorry, Chair, through you, my sincere apologies. Just wanted to know what the major changes are, because reading through this it all sounds familiar, but that may be because of the training we've done, so it would just be useful to know the significant changes.
While Tandy's looking, I'll just look, because I think we went through those in part 2 of the last meeting with Hymans. That's where we went through them.
Councillor Smallwood, you had a question.
Firstly, I warmly welcome the training to come, I must say. My second point is around good governance and how we compare that to other members of the London funds and other councils. Apologies, I'm not getting all the lingo right. I'm sure the training will help me with that. But I just wanted to understand how we compare our policies and how we share good practice as well.
Having been to a number of Pan London meetings over the last 2 months, it's fair to say we don't do things for 33 different ways, but there's probably 4 or 5 different groups of how things are dealt with in London. I think we're in a place where we've got a good idea of where the Civ are taking us. It's fair to say, and the legislation, sorry, let's do it right, the legislation is taking us. It's fair to say there's a number of others, maybe in London particularly, who aren't quite there yet in terms of things have got to move quite quickly. But if I take my hat off and look 3 years in the future, we should all be very, very similar, because we have to be. And that's the whole idea of the Fit for Future. It's to move us in a way so that the various, I think there's 5 SIVs. The SIVs take advantage of the economies of scale. We do things the same, although we will all have different investment strategies, but the amount of instruments on that over the next 5 to 6 years will be reduced significantly, because at the moment 32 councils, I don't know how many instruments, let's just say we've all got 10. That's not deliverable from a SIV, so we'll see a shakedown of that over time, but it's positive. But I think we are probably, with the work we've done with the SIV, so on reporting, there's some councils that actually do their own reports. We rely on the SIV and third parties. There are some councils out there where not all their investments go through the custodian. All of ours do. And so I think we're probably towards the better end in terms of governance, and maybe quite a few.
Marion.
Just specifically on these policies, some of them, so for example the funding strategy statement, there's guidance about what needs to be in that, and so they should all be very similar. There, as Peter's just said, some of the other things, though, I think we will find there'll be guidance in the future, so like conflicts of interest policy, because that's in the new regulations, and again the administration strategy. I think you're probably sort of the top half, as it were, in terms of some of these, because I know, for example, there are funds out there that don't have an administration strategy. I also know, for example, because you'll all be aware, I'm really hot on the training, is that I think you're at the forefront of the training in terms of not only have you got a policy, but you monitor it, and you monitor it very clearly, and it's at every meeting. I know funds out there who have a training policy, but it doesn't appear it's monitored. It appears in the annual reports once a year, but it's pretty unclear what happens in between. So while I'm sure there are still things that we can improve on, because no one's perfect, I think that you're sort of in a good place. You've got some of these policies, and it'll be updating some of them as the guidance changes.
Thank you, Marion, for that really positive feedback. That's really reassuring. With my audit head on, I'm just going to reiterate the training, and that's just my audit background. The training isn't going to go away, unfortunately, councillors, and we do have to do it, and it's not going to get any less. It's probably going to get more moving forward with the new legislation. Tunde, could you arrange for the, is it Aon modules? To be sent to Councillor Smallwood, so that at least he can start. Even if he does module 1, that will give him an insight into some of the, should I say, jargon, or the abbreviation and stuff that we use. At least he'll have a bit of an understanding, and then we can slowly move forward from there. And the same with yourself, Councillor Bassett. If you can just do module 1, that will give you an insight into what we're talking about. And moving forward, I think it's going to change anyway. So we need to be a bit more on the ball on there. And Tunde, you had... Do you want to ask a question, or do you want Tunde to do the two?
Just very quickly, we had an internal audit review. I can't remember when it was. It may have been longer than I remember. But it would be useful in a part 2, or even just publicly, just to have a look at what bits are still outstanding, if any, because there's significant work been done on training and governance and knowledge, which I think was part of the main drive of it. So there has been a significant improvement, and I think that should be acknowledged, and thanks to officers and others who have made that possible. But it would be useful just to have a quick check back and make sure we haven't missed anything. I know you have already a load of work to do, but I just think it's helpful at this point.
Tunde.
So the last 2 items on this agenda for committee to decide on are the Internal Dispute Resolution Procedure, IDRP Guide. So this has been revised due to an advice from Hampshire on how to deal with the stage 1 approach. So initially, stage 1 is being heard by Hillingdon, but we were advised that for maintained schools, which are the local authority area schools, and Hillingdon. The stage 1 stays with Hillingdon, but for the academies, they need to have a stage 1 officer. So, because the stage 2 is heard by Hillingdon as well, so we can be seen to be doing both. So each employer is supposed to do stage 1, then the administering authority takes over stage 2 before it goes on to the Ombudsman. So this has been made clear in this revised IDRP. And the last document, unfortunately, we brought this to committee in March 2025, the administration strategy statement, which Marion mentioned earlier on. But with the pensions dashboard being coming into effect, we have to sort of amend a couple of paragraphs within this so that all employers and the administering authorities recognize their responsibilities, and these are highlighted in blue in the pension administration strategy statement. So we enjoin committee to, one, note the dates of the next pensions meeting, note the work plan, then the continuous development of members, GOP and the GCOP update, and note and approve the draft funding strategy statement for consultation, note and approve the revised internal dispute resolution procedure guide, and note and approve the revised pensions administration strategy statement, which includes the responsibilities of employers and administering authorities on pensions dashboard. Thank you.
Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. I have one question on the dispute policy. So I understand the reason for it to be employer-led, and we have some very good employers who engage very well. What is the risk of the employers that don't engage as well not fully satisfying this criteria around stage 1, and therefore it putting this pension fund at risk of greater liability if things are escalated without being dealt with correctly?
So we do have guidance which we provide to all employers in terms of how to go about this. So the next stage in this now is to send out some information to all employers who haven't necessarily set up a stage 1 procedure for themselves, so that they get on board with this, and we will assist them alongside Hampshire on how to go about this. And all they need is just to follow, because the regulations are quite clear in terms of how what the procedure is like. But if at any point in time they fail to follow the procedure, I think that could be picked up at the second stage, and we will refer them back to the stage 1 to make sure they go through it. But if everything else fails and it goes to the Ombudsman, the onus is on the employer rather than the fund.
Councillor Mathers.
And as a supplementary of that, so sometimes it's not necessarily the things aren't being done by the employer, it's the reporting of. And what mitigations do we have in place to ensure that if an employee reported to their employer and then the employers do stage 1, rather than it coming via the fund and then going to the employer, to make sure that we still capture those? Because my concern may be that if it stays internal at the start, we may not get any visibility until it appears at stage 2 or doesn't. I may have misunderstood the process, but I wonder if that's a risk.
Right, thank you, Councillor Miller. So the process is controlled by us right from the beginning. So the first stage is for the complaint to go straight to Hampshire, who will then refer that to us. So Hampshire will pick it up, refer it to us, we refer it to the employer, and we follow through as well, make sure everything is done stage by stage, so there won't be a break in between in terms of the steps to be taken. So the possibility of missing out on any complaint is the risk is quite minimal.
Just one question on that then. Will the administrative authorities, will they get some training then from Hampshire, or is it just that Hampshire there as a guidance for them? But is there any specific training plan in place?
I do believe Hampshire have some training information and documents which they can, and they can guide the employers as well. They can hold their hands through the whole process. We
can't enforce them to do the training, can we? Would it be that it would be...
We can compel them to do the training, but not enforce it.
I think it would be worth, in their interest, to say that they need to, do the training if... it's a new process for them, really, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Yeah, it is a new process. From my experience, if a dispute comes up, they are very, very, very cooperative in terms of what we tell them, because they look at the monetary effect on them, like a fine from the ombudsman, so which they do not want. That is the first thing we flag up to them, that look, this could cost you something you haven't budgeted for. So they do pay attention to it.
Good, because I was just a bit concerned. You said if they haven't followed process, then it comes back to us, and then we send it back to them. So we don't want to be going backwards and forwards. We want to just do it at first point of call, and then when it comes to stage 2 to us, and then take it from there. But that's fine. If they're quite cooperative, I'm happy with that. Are we then, as a committee, I'm not going to read out all points 1 to 7 as in the pack. Are we okay to note and agree? Noted, agreed. Lovely. I should keep forgetting to put this mic on. So that, I think, brings us to the end of part 1 of the meeting. I'd like to thank all the officers here today and members and everybody on YouTube watching. I'd like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we'll see you all in 2026. Thank you.